Hello everybody and welcome back to KSP2. We're just going to jump right on in and pick up where we left off, and that is with a crew on the outside of Duna, waiting to get back home. So in the last episode we dropped off a probe onto the surface, as you see there, and unfortunately, as much as we'd like to land these kerbals on the surface, and as much as we'd like to see that Duna monument, landing on a nuclear engine just does not seem very, comfortable for anyone involved. So we are going to bring these kerbals home. Billy Bobley, Munlock, and Ronwise Kerman did a great job dropping off that probe, discovering Duna for the first time, proving that we can go interplanetary and return home. Well, we'll work on that last part soon. So that small amount of burn was just enough to take us out of Duna's sphere of influence. We used our maneuver to do a flyby of Ike, and that will help us kind of pitch our way out. I want to get a low flyby, as low as I can, because it's going to be a little bit before we can get the chance to visit Ike, and as much as I'd love to land on it with what we have, because if there's no atmosphere, then landing with the nuclear engine is less problematic, but still, they're not ready for a landing just yet, so we're just gonna do a flyby. Nice 42 kilometers. I'm not exactly sure how safe it is to fly by Ike at, but I feel 42 is safe enough. So we let K2D2 handle the burn, and that's why it time warps so quickly away from the planet. I kind of wish it didn't time warp so quickly. A little bit of visual appeal is nice, and sometimes when you warp too quickly, you miss all the good stuff. Alright, so here we go. We have our encounter, and that encounter is going to speed us up and launch us clear out of the sphere of influence of Duna, which is what we want, so that's good. And it turns out that I've done this entire time without extending my solar panels once. I don't know how I did that. I don't use action groups in KSP2 very much. The action groups aren't very intuitive, so here I am discovering that I can't bring any Kerbal out on EVA because apparently the hatch is blocked by this parachute. However, I distinctly remember getting one of my Kerbals out on EVA in the last episode, so I don't know where that came from. Maybe it's a bug, but it doesn't look like a bug. Like, it makes sense that the hatch would be blocked by that parachute. It looks like it would be blocked by that parachute, but for some reason, I think maybe the bug was allowing the Kerbal to get out in the first place. So here we are approaching Ike. We have some science that we can do in high space. And I mean to do science in low space, but I end up getting too caught up in the soundtrack of Ike to really just take a second and do the work that I was supposed to do. But anyways, here is just the taste of the Ike soundtrack. We'll hear more when we land eventually. As with all the others, it's just light, ambient strings to announce our approach. And once we start getting in low, that's when the real music is going to start kicking in. I love the way that the soundtrack is situational here. I don't know any other game that does something like that. There's games that have different soundtracks, but it's just something different. But anyways, here we go. And as we pull away from our periapsis, the music begins to fade back into the ambient sounds. From what I've been able to gather, every celestial body has two parts to the soundtrack. There's coming close to the surface and then an actual landing on the surface. So in order to hear the full Ike soundtrack, the best way to do it is to actually complete a full landing. So we'll have to come back here eventually. So the crew says goodbye to Ike, and time warps away until they leave the sphere of influence of Ike, return to the sphere of influence of Duna, and then make their way out back to the sphere of influence of the sun. Such a beautiful planet. I'm so excited that we have taken this step and conquered, well, I wouldn't say we conquered Duna, but we approached Duna, and we have landed on it, and this is like I mentioned in the last episode, this is the farthest I've ever done in any of my Kerbals. I've never gone to Eve. I mean, I've been to Eve, but I've never actually made the trip and mission, and especially not in a career mode playthrough. So I'm excited. We're going to be doing the Duna Monument next at the later half of this episode. We're going to go visit the Duna Monument, and then after that, we can kind of turn our sights on other planets. We can turn our sights on Eve, on Jewel, you know, on any of the smaller things. That one planet that doesn't seem to exist, we can go there if we wanted. And I'm really excited about that. It's the whole Kerbal system is our oyster. So now I'm plotting in the return maneuver, and the best way that I figured out how to do is to just extend until I get into the orbital path of it, and then adjust the time of when I make that maneuver until I get the closest possible for the least amount of delta V. And the two things I want to do here are moving prograde as well as moving radial, because sometimes you can use less delta V instead of pushing forward and going faster. If you just change the angle of your orbit, it makes things a little bit easier. So I'm just trying to fine-tune in our rendezvous, and I decided I'm going to kind of take what I can get. And so I get my first encounter. It's not a great one, but we're going to take it. We can always mid-course to correct it later. So let's go ahead and plot this into K2D2 and let it handle the burn. So it says that we've lost ComNet because we've gone far out enough. However, I'm not really sure what that means in this situation, because I know that there's no actual ComNet in the game. So, but anyways, here we are doing our burn. It takes quite a bit, so I'm just going to go ahead and fade to the ending of it. And there we go. And so now K2D2 has finished its burn. Let's go ahead and turn time back on. Get rid of our maneuver and check our work and see how it's come out. So we still have a rendezvous, but it's not in the place that we thought. So, but that's okay. Any rendezvous is a good rendezvous. So let's focus on Kerbin and see what we're working with here. And it turns out our rendezvous is actually very far out. So let's go ahead and kind of adjust that a little bit. I'd like to come in a little closer. By being so far out, it gives us very little time in Kerbin's sphere of influence. So if we want to make our change, we're gonna really have to brute force that change, because as you see here, we're only in the sphere of influence for a short period of time. So let's go ahead and time warp our way. Taking a look. Munlock and Ronwise were freaking out a little bit. Billy Bobley seemed to be keeping his cool. So here we are, approaching the little splash. I don't know what you would call that. The ripples that appear out of the sphere of influence. It's very interesting. If you notice, the ones that go outward, radial out, is your entrance point. And the ones that radial in is your exit point. Just an easy way to kind of tell which direction you're going when you approach a celestial body. I think that's very helpful. So let's go ahead and lower our periapsis to something a little more reasonable. It seems like we're going to be able to have enough time to do our capture burn, so I'm not too worried about that. Once again, plot into K2D2, let it handle the burn, and we're just going to let it go. We have no electricity, but then because of time warp, we suddenly do. So the moment that I was told that we didn't have electricity, it started refilling again, so. And it's just because of the time warp. But anyways, our time warp ended. We're going to be burning in 3 seconds. And there we go. We start the long process of slowing ourselves down enough to get captured. So once again, let's just fast forward and come to the conclusion of that. And there we go. We are now gonna be stable in the curve and sphere of influence as long as we don't make any interceptions with the mun or mid-miss that would potentially launch us back out into the solar orbit. Let's go ahead and kill the maneuver, turn back time, or turn time back on, excuse me. And our periapsis is 6,000 meters above, so we want to kind of bring that down a little bit. I like to have a nice low orbit when I come in for my re-entry. That way it allows us to come in at a bit better of an angle. However, this maneuver is the curse. So it takes 276, we have 716, and I go ahead and plot it into K2D2. And I had mentioned earlier that K2D2 moves a little too fast, so once we align to the right location and it time warps us to the maneuver point, we go ahead and get a quick encounter with the mun. Just ever so slightly, we got into the mun sphere of influence. And now, our maneuver is slightly different. It's changed. And that change is not going to be good for us. The problem is, the thing that just really irritates me is that if I had just dropped my periapsis down until it was within the atmosphere, then, you know, I could aerobrake ourselves on the way home. As you see here, we're bringing in our orbit nice and low, and we are running out of delta V. What happened to that 700 that we have? It took all of that just to get back to this location. So, I hate to say it, but our Kerbals may be stuck in space for a little bit. Thankfully, they are, you know, back home. They're orbiting their home planet, but with only 1 meter per second of delta V left in the tank, there is not much hope of anything to go on. And with the hatch being blocked by the parachute, there's no option for one of them to get out and push with an RCS. So Billy Bobley, Munlock, and Ron Wise are gonna get out the deck of cards and hang out and talk and just spend the time orbiting the planet, acting as an impromptu satellite. And the rest of the world is gonna go on and continue where their work left off, in their honor, in their name. And we'll check back with them eventually. Maybe we'll try to send a rescue mission. But anyways, we are back at the KSC. We've got a bunch of science to spend, and we are going to hop immediately in R&D. I spend a lot of time looking at different things, so I'm just going to skip ahead to what we actually purchase, and that is the autonomous sampling for the rover, because I'd like to send a rover to Duna, and I'm thinking by having that we can get a little more science that way. So now it's time for the building process. I'm going to speed it up a little bit because it does take quite a while, but we're going to go through the entire build for this mission. Now, one tip I have here is I was building this rover with the idea of the spaceplane hangar in mind. So it started off sideways, so I was just assuming that everything would be good sideways. However, it probably would have been more helpful to me in the long run if I had built this rover vertically instead of horizontally like this. And so you will see me later, once I make it into a rocket, you'll see me struggle with the positioning of things, constantly having to rotate and whatnot. So I'm just going to say right now, if you're going to do a rover like this, it would probably be better to design it vertically. If you're going to attach it onto a rocket. If you're just going to make a rover, then this is perfectly fine. But if you're going to attach a rover onto anything and need it to be vertical, you should just build it vertically. So anyways, I've kind of talked through things. I've put some science on there. I've put a solar panel, and I'm now working on the communications so that way we can transmit. I decided at one point to put command seats on there because we're gonna, we're gonna send a Kerbal. We're gonna send 2 Kerbals actually. Oh, most important part of the rover is right here, which is the reaction wheel. We're gonna go ahead and tuck that in right in the center. And that is super useful because if your rover is anything but upright, it is gonna have a bad time. And if you can't get yourself back upright, then your rover is basically done. And the mission's done, and all that was for a waste. And so the reaction wheel, by being able to toggle it on and off, allows you to flip your craft and put it wherever you need to. So here I am putting some side decouplers on there, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to attach a rocket to this craft. And as you see here, I'm having to rotate every item in order to get it into a vertical aspect. So this is where the start of my problems come from. So I get the fuel tank, but then apparently I can't attach the engine to it. It's just having such an issue. So this is when I decide to put the rocket on the back of the rover. And this rocket right here, the fuel tank and the engine, is going to be utilized to slow the descent of the rover on Duna and potentially have a powered landing. However, we are going to be using our parachute, so it's a combination of both, really. So we got a swivel engine on there, and that should be good enough. It's got a good thrust to weight. So our Kerbals today that we're going to choose is Bob Kerman and Jerbal Kerman, who Jerbal is a pilot, Bob is a scientist, so I think the combination of them will be great. Will be a great team to send to Duna and discover the monument. So I did a test run, and I was having trouble with my control orientation because of the fact that I made it a rover first as opposed to the command seat first. It was snapping to the rover's control, and the rover is technically backwards. This was my first rover, so but technically it was backwards, so when I got off to a good start, my prograde was pointed at the ground, so not a good start. But I talked right through it, but we switched our rocket to now be vertical because I wanted to put it on the top of a rocket. But now, because we've spent so much time doing it horizontally, everything wants to snap to the horizontal plane. So we're going to have to rotate everything, and it's just a big ol' hassle. But anyways, the control was easily fixed enough. I just have to do it in the actual launch itself, in the reality, not in the VAB. And I can change the control point, and then everything was easy. So we are attaching a nuclear engine as our interplanetary stage, and then these big medium-sized tanks with a mainsail engine for the lifter. That comes with 3,500 delta V, which is basically enough to get into orbit. If we were a little more efficient, it would be perfect and be an SSTO. But we are going to want a little more oomph with that. Here you can see me trying to put on the wings, and like I mentioned before, because of the funkiness of the directionality, that's been going on, I had to really adjust them around to make sure that they fit. Let's put a small probe core in that little inner stage, just so that way we have something besides just the kerbals in command. We're going to put some communication dishes on here. I don't know how useful those are going to be. And we're going to put some solar panels on there. We're going to make them retractable because there's a chance that we might be able to use some of our nuclear engine in our descent burn. So we want to make sure that they don't burn up in case we need them again. So let's go ahead and save this under the Duna series. And this is the Monumental Rover 1. It's gonna, for some reason, it kept saying that I had one already, so I'm just changing it around. And again, it's telling me, do you want to override it? Even when I give it a new name. And so it was just basically I was asking if I wanted to save the craft file. So there was a little confusion, but that was on my part. So let's add a little bit extra, well, and when I say a little bit, I mean twice the amount of fuel on that interplanetary stage. Let's go ahead and put some struts on here because this is a rather tall and awkward looking rocket. A little toothbrush shape. Wish I could put a strut to the fairing, but alas, I cannot. And we went out for another test. I call them tests because there is no simulator, so we have to just test it. And I decide to throw this heat shield on there to protect the engine bell upon descent. But I put it in the wrong location, so it's actually not going to be able to do anything. It's never going to see the light of day because it will be discarded with the lower stage instead of staying with the upper stage to protect the engine bell. So basically, I just added that extra weight for no reason. I'm throwing on some side boosters now, another set of nuclear engines with a fuel tank to allow the fuel to transfer between the side tanks and the center. So that way when we jettison the side tanks, the center one is refilled. So let's go ahead and check our delta V requirements, and so far it's saying we don't have enough. I do think we're going to be doing some aero braking, so those numbers aren't exact, but I decided to just tack on another set of nuclear boosters and asparagus stage them so the two sides will empty, and then it'll be another set of two sides, and then they will empty, and then it'll be the center. And that should be enough to bring us interplanetary and capture our burn, and hopefully bring us down to the planet. However, because of the extra weight, I need to get a little bit extra oomph on takeoff, so I changed them around. I started with some SRBs, but I did eventually change them around to just more medium-sized tanks with mainsail engines and fuel lines attached between them. And so now when we check our trip planner, we have enough, more than enough delta V to land on Duna. It's going to be a one-way trip. I don't have a good way of getting their rover off the surface, so we will plan a rescue mission at some point, but for the time being, they are just going to be focused on their mission. So we go ahead and take a peek inside the fairings, and Jerbal Kerman is very happy. Bob is pretty stoic, just preparing himself mentally for the journey, thinking of all the science he's going to do. So we test our lights and see the fairing shell above us. We are using the first-person mod, the KSP2 IVA mod. We're going to be using it a little bit throughout this mission. Because with the external command seat, it really shines through. So this episode was recorded before the most recent update was made, so we still have our countdown the way that it should be. We will see how our game was affected by the update in the next episode. So a healthy thrust to weight, nothing too extreme, but still something over 1.5, so we're able to lift off the launch pad with relative ease. And I'm excited. This will be the real trip. Testing is done. Everything has been thought of and double checked, and anything that we are going to face as our obstacles are just going to be the situational obstacles that we're going to have to face and deal with as we go along. We are going to show the rest of this lift until we get to our main engine cutoff. However, we're going to kind of skip forward because there's no point in rehashing a circularization of low curve in orbit. So once we reach MECO, main engine cutoff, we're going to skip forward. But for now, we're going to enjoy the plumes, the clouds, the stars, and the music. We get a little bit of a heating effect on our fairing, but nothing that I really am worried about. And then there we go, we've reached main engine cutoff. So now once we reach our apoapsis, we will be circularizing. Let's take a quick peek inside the capsule as we get ready to jettison our fairing, revealing to us the vast expanse of space and the beautiful blue ball that we call Kerbal. Jerbal takes a look over at Bob's face as he looks on in awe. Anytime you see us in the first person mode, it will be Jerbal's point of view because that is the seat that it is connected to. So we go ahead and take a look at their faces as we get ready to circularize. And Jerbal is just having the time of her life. Bob is trying to play it cool, but you can tell that he's having a good time. I love the fact that their heads get pushed back as the engines kick on. There's a little bit of physics and movement to it. We successfully stage off our side boosters, and once again our center tank is now filled with fuel and will have more than enough Delta V to circularize us. We're also going to skip ahead past our exiting of the sphere of influence. So we are already now in Kerbal's sphere of influence. So we're going to focus on Duna. Bring our focus back to our ship. So now Duna is targeted, and we are going to plot in our interplanetary burn. So first we're going to extend our prograde until our orbital period matches up with that of Duna's. And as you can see here, we can see where our approaches are going to be. I had already time warped to the relative most efficient window for a Duna transfer, so that's why all it took was some prograde to reach that. So, like I mentioned before, the mainsail engine is quite powerful, and the fact that it brought us all the way to our interplanetary burn is just wonderful. The more fuel that we can use, or the less fuel that we can use of our nuclear engines, the better, because we are really going to need to rely on those to come back home. After what happened with Billy Bobley and the rest of the crew, we don't want to end up stranding our Kerbal in a place where they can't complete their mission. If we're going to strand a Kerbal, we want them to be able to be successful. So here we are, just time warping to the dark side of the planet and getting ready to do our burn. And our engine kicks on. And it's going to be a bit of a long burn, but nothing too bad. So let's skip ahead until we reach our exit. And there we go. Oh, so I guess we weren't in Kerbal's sphere of influence at that time. I thought we were. So at this point then, so this is going to be kind of our mid-course correction. After you leave the sphere of influence of any celestial body, your predicted orbit path changes a little bit. So this will be what brings us closer to Duna. So we get a nice face full of plumes, and we watch the rest of our fuel burn out and the transfer over to the nuclear powered engines. And with 5 of them, there is some serious thrust to weight. The curse of the nuclear engine taking forever for their long burns is null and void in this situation. When you have that many, you go. So our 2 side boosters flame out, which allows us to jettison them, which will fill up the tanks of the rest. So they are now full tanks once again. And eventually we will jettison those side and get even more fuel. So here we are, just kind of zooming in on our orbital path. We get these funky little lines because we are currently burning, and once we stop burning, they will disappear. Well, I guess once we cleared our maneuver, they disappeared. Interesting. But anyways, we're going to skip ahead a little bit to the actual rendezvous aspect of it. It's not a great approach. We're going to be crossing its path very shortly, having another very short entrance into the sphere of influence. So we're going to have to utilize our time wisely to make sure we have enough time to capture. And we reach our first closest point, but that is not where we connect. It is actually going to be at our second. So here we are, being chased by our ripples. We are now in Duna's sphere of influence. So let's go ahead and, at our periapsis, plot a maneuver. I was having a little bit of trouble with the menu, so I just switched my direction, and that was enough to fix it. So we're adding a bunch of retrograde, really just power through, and that will be enough to get us captured. I did, however, put too much in. We changed our orbital path, so let's remove some of that retrograde, and circularize. We have a high periapsis because Ike really likes to get involved in things and mess with your orbits. So we have to kind of avoid that. So we're going to come in nice and low, not that low, but nice and low, right above the atmosphere. So we're not going to be in the atmosphere. We're not aerobraking just yet, but we're utilizing the massive amounts of fuel that we still have to bring our orbit nice and low. So once again, K2D2 is handling the burn. Certain things like landing I'm not going to rely on the computer for, but precise burns, I feel like that's acceptable. So as you see here, we have 1,700 delta V. Bob is freaking out because the reality that he is going to be coming through the atmosphere is finally dawning on him. And he really, really, really wish that he had a capsule. Jerbal's doing just great. She is excited. Let's go ahead and drop it down. We get a quick little intercept with Ike, and that actually helps us bring our orbit down significantly for only a small amount of delta V. So that is going to be very helpful. So let's go ahead and time warp our way to that intercept. As you can see here, it's an even smaller intercept than any of the other ones from the rest of this episode. We are just barely gonna kiss the surface. Like a stone skipping off the surface of a pond. Just enough to give us a little boost. So there we go. We are now in Ike's sphere of influence. we're gonna get just a tiny little taste of that soundtrack once again. Let's do some science. I think we've already done this science before, but everything helps. Or actually, rather than everything helps, I should say, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Yep, as quickly as it came on, the strings disappear. So yeah, we definitely need to come back there and see what that song's all about. I'm gonna go ahead and make my maneuver plan. As you see here, Ike really wants to get in the way of things. I should have let it. Honestly, there was an intercept there that would have brought my orbit down even lower, and that would have been really good. But you know, we have plenty of Delta V. Like I mentioned before, I gotta stop saying that. I keep mentioning things before and rehashing them, but nuclear engines, not great to land on in an atmosphere. I let K2D2 handle it, and so it rapidly time warped past the surface, so that way it could get us back to our apoapsis to where the burn point is. If anyone knows if there's a setting somewhere, I've looked around but I couldn't find it, but maybe other people are a little smarter than I that may know if there's a setting that can adjust how fast K2D2 time warps. Yeah, did you see that little intercept? How low that would have brought our orbit? It's okay. We don't need to be the most efficient here. We can be a little bit wasteful, a little overbuild. So, you doing okay there, Bob? So now we're gonna time warp our way to the planet, and pushing ourselves a little too fast. It just rushed up on us, but here we are, once again visiting Duna. This is not only this Bob's first time seeing it, it's Bob's first time in space, so he is justifiably nervous. So now what we're going to be doing is working on lowering our orbit so we can come in nice and soft at a nice angle without too much worry of re-entry heating. Jerbal tries to do some little aerial acrobatics to cheer up Bob, but it just seems to make him more flustered. Our engines fire on time and very quickly are able to lower our apoapsis until we're in a reasonable orbit above the surface. However, our periapsis just dropped down to below the atmosphere's level, so we will be coming back in. I thought we were going to be coming back in directly now. However, it turns out that is actually on the other side of our orbit, so we would have been fine for a little bit. We could have actually just gone to our apoapsis and burned prograde, but I thought we were about to come in now. So instead we pointed radial in, and that was enough to bring our periapsis above 50 kilometers. So now it's time to plot in our landing burn. But we don't want to just land just anywhere. There's a very specific spot. And if you can see up there in the top right corner of the planet, top right part of the planet, there's a little yellow dot, and that is representative of the Duna monument. And that is our mission for today. I have this little screen that kept staying up for some reason until I clicked around in enough places. So now I need to figure out the best place to get on the correct plane of the part, because we are not currently going to be flying over the desired location. So we need to get ourselves in a place where we're going to be flying over. But while we're at it, we might as well just make ourselves land. So playing around with the retrograde and the normal and anti-normal, we are going to go ahead and plot in our landing maneuver. Just kind of eyeballing it, not really paying attention to atmospheric forces. Unfortunately, there's no trajectories mod for KSP2 yet, but regardless, this game does do a little bit better than stock KSP1 at predicting your landing zone. So we're just going to kind of push it a little forward of our goal and then see where we end up from there. Let's go ahead and do our burn. Beautiful red plume behind us. Bob has yet to calm down, but you know, I just feel bad for the guy. He's experiencing this in such the worst way possible. Jerbal's having a great old time and just wants Bob to be comfortable. But it's not time for Bob to be comfortable just yet because they haven't even gotten through the thick of it. So I go ahead and delete my maneuver node, and for some reason it did not put me in the right place. I don't know why it didn't do the correct burn, but maybe I was just off on my direction. I don't know. But let's go ahead and just plot in another. Can't hurt. We have 802 delta V. It's only going to take 113. And it would help to activate my engine if I want to use it. There we go. At some point we jettisoned our lower stage. Oh, that was during the landing burn. That's right. We had to use more of our fuel than we had in our nuclear stage. So now we are just left with the swivel, and we're going to use that to help us in our landing. But for now, I'm going to just kind of let these kerbals drift down on their own. Enjoy the soundtrack, and hopefully I'll see you on the surface. Some more acrobatics to ease his mind. Or maybe just make yourself feel better. It is going to be interesting to see how they're going to handle this without a heat shield, but hopefully the engine bell can take it. And once again, misjudging our trajectory, we are no longer going to make that landing burn that we were hoping to make. So let's go ahead and get rid of that maneuver and burn whatever fuel we can. We've got quite a bit left in our tank, but we're going to burn whatever fuel we can to bring ourselves a little bit closer to our goal. It's that little yellow dot in the center of that crater directly ahead of us. So I try to burn radial out to kind of lift it, but that doesn't quite work. So instead of plotting a maneuver, we're just going to try to burn it ourselves. I'd like to use some of this fuel to slow myself down a little bit. Use my SAS to point ourselves radial out. And just kind of send it. That's as best we can do. We gain some vertical height to that, but because of the arrow forces, it's not going to really do anything. So we kind of point ourselves more in the direction of going, but we don't have enough fuel to really matter. So once again, we are going vertically. We are landing on Duna, but ascending upwards. So let's go ahead and jettison that lower fuel tank. We now have no more liquid hydrogen, or oxygen, any kind of fuel. All we have is electric battery to power the wheels, and a reaction wheel to keep ourselves upright. So now it's just going to be on Jerbal, whether or not she can pilot this well enough and land it safely. She's told Bob countless times across this journey that she can handle it, but he knows that it's her first flight as well, so. And he would really appreciate it if she stopped trying to make him feel better with acrobatics. Anything else. Just do anything else. And the parachutes deploy. Whether or not they deployed high enough is yet to be seen. I hadn't practiced any kind of landing when I did my test flights. I only practiced the lifter vehicle and the interplanetary stage, so this will be a surprise for all of us. And that is very fast. Oh, that was very fast that it landed. And the tumbling was not great, but thankfully the reaction wheel is toggled on, so Jerbal has a little bit of control of there. We broke something off, not entirely sure what, but doesn't seem to be necessary to the craft. All four wheels are intact and it's still getting power. Bob, thankful to be touched down on surface, but yet to be any kind of calm. Jerbal's enjoying driving, but we all need to figure out how to turn off that reaction wheel. This is something where action groups would be very handy, but I do eventually find it's under the utility menu. And so we go ahead and turn that off and get ourselves turned around, pointed downhill. Thankfully, all we have to do is chase the sun and we will arrive at our destination. But we did land 20 kilometers away, so it is going to be a long, arduous, dangerous mission. So don't wear yourself out too quickly, Bob. 21 kilometers. Excuse me. So this is a mod I don't use very often, but it's an action group manager that allows you to set up and utilize and remove action groups at any time. It's actually here where I discovered that the reaction wheel is called the SRW125. Very intuitive. Let's go ahead and close the action group, because all I needed to do was find out what it was called, and then I can access it through the parts manager. So by turning our torque off, the reaction wheel no longer works, and now the only movements that are taken by the computer affect the wheel. But I'm going to need to be able to keep that handy, because the dunes on Duna can be very treacherous. Oddly enough, there seems to be some sort of mechanic that KSP2 likes to write itself out. You'll see a couple times. It didn't happen there, but sometimes the rover will try to snap to the upright position. It was very interesting. So I went ahead and saved my game after nearly crashing. And so we're going to be doing that quite a bit on this journey. And here we are once again in the IVA mode. It's not completed in a lot of places, but in the external command seat it does exactly what it needs to do, and I love that. So we're going to just be skipping ahead to certain portions. This was a long mission and it took a while to drive there, and if I just focused all the time on the driving aspect, that would be, you know, its own video, and we don't need that. Here we are flipping once more because going too fast, and we just broke off the scanner arm as well as the solar panel and communications dish. So doing well here. We still have our science juniors, and we still have our kerbals, and we still have all four wheels. Yeah, see, this is that thing that I was telling you about, that kind of like auto snap to upright. I don't know if that's a bug or a feature, but it was kind of helpful. We had our reaction wheel though, so we were in no danger. Without the reaction wheel, if we were to flip over, we'd be in a heap of trouble. Just looking at a little wispy cloud as we drove by. Be interesting to see what kind of weather they have here. Bob finally calmed down now that they've driven for a couple kilometers. He trusts in Jerbal, and you know, Jerbal once again, just enjoying it. Pilots are just fun kerbals. They're looking great with Ike in the background. But of course, because I was paying attention to the kerbals, that means that the kerbals weren't paying attention to where they were going. So we're gonna skip ahead again. Sun is setting. The sky and the ground are starting to get blue. A lot of the ground ahead of us is silhouetted to the point where it's just darkness. It was really fun just cresting up these hills and just discovering how much more we had to go ahead of us. And you know, am I closer? No, I feel like I'm not closer. But then you turn on the HUD and you realize, oh no, I'm a couple kilometers closer. Thankfully, the big old rocks have no collision here, so we can drive straight through them without fear. That's not to say it doesn't surprise us and make us nervous, though. So now we are heading fairly quickly downhill, and counterintuitively, the best way to keep our craft sucked to the terrain and not flipping over is to go faster. So it's a very stressful time right now for me, anyways. The kerbals seem to be fine, but yep, because if they were to crash, if they were to die right now, I don't think I would revert. I think we would have to accept that fate because they've come too far. At this point, it's you know, we've dug down deep. This is the mission that we have. This is the mission that we're going for. And if anything happens to them, we have to accept that fate. And if they don't make it to the monument, then we're going to have to send Kerbals who can. So now the ground is completely black, silhouetted by the sun. Only our headlights to light the way, but they don't shine very far. And crest over another hill and get ready to come down into another valley. Let's save our game a little bit. We reached flatland at some point, and that was very useful, but we instantly spun out because we were going too fast, so that was just us getting ourselves fixed towards our position again. And our goal is slightly to the left of the sun. And as you see right there on the edge of the hill, that little pillar, well, that grand pillar, but that pillar in the distance, that is where we need to go. It wasn't entirely flat that entire time. Eventually we did get back to another hilly part, and at that point our rover ran out of electric charge and we could no longer drive. So we're going to start by extending the solar panels, but then I realized we're still moving downhill, and if anything happens and we flipped in any sort of way, those solar panels would be destroyed, and that is our only way of generating electricity now that the solar panel on top has been destroyed. So we're going to keep those panels retracted. We're using all the speed that we've built up to keep moving forward. There's no way to actually control the momentum of the craft. So we're just going to let it bring ourselves to a stop and then try to hold on to the brakes as much as possible. I couldn't find a toggle for the brake, so we just kind of let it come to a stop on its own. So we're extending the panels once more, holding on to the brake key, and we're just going to tuck in for the long night. The Kerbals will tell themselves little campfire stories, unable to leave their seats though, so they will be really happy to stretch their legs whenever they get the chance. Yep, so there's nothing we can do to keep the brake on, so we're just going to hold it and time warp a little bit until the sun is in a better angle. It was surprising me the fact that the sun was actually shining on us and we couldn't see. So we're going to tuck in our solar panels for the night. There's no need to have them extended when there's no sun out, and there's no need to risk having them break. We're going to just time warp our way through the night until we can get some solar exposure. So once we extend our solar panels, we will see whether or not we warped far enough. And so now there is some charge going at the top, even though it says there's no solar exposure. It probably would have been better to wait until they rotated on their own, but I'm going to go ahead and time warp ahead until we have a large enough pool of electricity that we can start driving again. See, now that it's rotated, now it says that there's stellar exposure. So now that we have enough electricity, we're going to retract the solar panels once more, make sure that our reaction wheel's turned off, and drive the 1.5 kilometers to the Duna monument. It's exciting times. And as we crest over the hill, we come to a nice little plateau. We're going to skip ahead just a little bit past that plateau, over another set of hill until we can spot the monument in the corner of our eye. Gonna have to change our angle though. I'm gonna start heading towards that, but don't want to do it so quick that we flop over, because again, anytime we flip over, we run the risk of killing ourselves or destroying our vehicle. And thankfully we're close enough that if we destroyed our vehicle, we can still waddle our way over there, but who wants to walk a kilometer? I mean, some people do, but not these Kerbals. And we're getting closer and closer to the monument, counting the amount of hills we have left, and I believe this is just one last one, so we have to speed down through this valley to keep ourselves from flopping over. Jerbal takes one last look at Bob. He's doing alright. Nope, another set of hills. So we're coming down at a weird angle, so we quickly turn on the reaction wheel, and that's enough to kind of push ourselves upright and control our craft's direction as we go through here. We already have enough speed. We don't need to depend on our wheels to move forward, and we're facing the direction that we want to go, so we don't need our wheels to move left and right. So by utilizing the reaction wheel, we were able to keep ourselves from flipping over. But here we are. We have made it. We are at the Duna Monument. I wanted to land with a rover because I'm still not the greatest at precision landing in atmosphere. There still leaves a lot to be desired as far as when I can successfully land exactly where I want to land. And so by dropping our Kerbals off with a rover, we guaranteed them some mobility. And that mobility was exactly what they needed to arrive here successfully. So our Kerbals, tired from their trip, ready to stretch their legs, are settling in for the long haul. We don't have any plans to rescue them anytime soon, and we're going to be turning our sights to a different celestial body in the next episode. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KSP2. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.